Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming and joining us for the learning of Teres Hashem, Be'ezras Hashem Yizbarach. We are welcoming in Mo Kushner, Irving Fishbaum, Baruch Ian, Eli Yudel, Saba, Eddie Chazan, Dr. Block, Marshall Castle, Aaron Swade, Michael, Shimon Klein, Yitzi Fuchs, Ruvain Pollack, Moshe Lehman, Dr. Guy, Shelley Zeitlin, Ben Zion Cohn, Stephen Holtzman, Nachman Champler, Ilya Shutman, Shimon Deer, Yehuda from Yerushalayim, Yitzi Muller, Naftali Javelin, Abe Arbach, Michael Lerner, and Moshe Lehman. We welcome in David Helfgott. Here in Shul, we have Michal Avram, Ruvain Shanit, we have Gedalia Engel, Avram Rezepkowitz, and we're late tonight. We had a lot going on over here. We counted Sfira and the Mishnah Yomis, which I recorded already because we're doing a chok tonight. The Mishnah Yomis is a very fascinating Mishnah Yomis, all about Mida Keneged Mida, and I told some stories, so I refer you to make sure to listen to the Mishnah Yomis. Tonight's daf is a little bit of a respite from a hard Gemara, a little bit of a breather this evening, as we are very happy to see Gedalia Engel back. It's about time. You missed an exciting Mishnah Yomis tonight. You could come in, it's okay. Yeah, well, the whole Mida Keneged Mida sugya. You were mentioned, by the way. One Valley Stream was mentioned. He's talking about the Mida Keneged Mida of how I got this house after a year's time. But anyway, okay. We are holding, by Ika Damasnala, which is 4 lines from the top, and I neglected to say that we are sponsored by A.B. Spry, for Nachas from all of his family, and we are sponsored by Michal Avram for everybody finishing Shas with Gesund. By the way, I wonder who might remember this. I know at least one person that's here. Ruvain Pollack, you were in Madison Square Garden for the Siyum the first time, correct?
Yes.
Yes, I don't know if you remember, but the Svira that night was Tiferes Shebet Tiferes.
Absolutely.
You remember?
I remember. It was very spirited.
Yeah, but the Svira was Tiferes Shebet Tiferes. Tonight's Svira.
Tonight's
Yeah, I remember because my brother and I were talking that none of the speakers mentioned it. And, he said it was like such an obvious... So Shelley is sitting there quietly. Shelley dedicated tonight's shir Le'ili Nishmas, his father, Yehuda Leib ben Yeruchim Fishel. Yehuda Leib ben Yeruchim Fishel. His neshama should have an aliyah, and Shelley for the Shabbos table on Kedoshim. I mentioned that the Arizal quotes a Zohar as saying that when we are mechadish something in Torah on Shabbos, it causes them to put a crown on our father and mother in Gan Eden. It's really an interesting thing, and it doesn't have to be a big chiddush. It's each person according to his ability. But if you have a Torah thought on Shabbos, it could cause a crown to be put on your parents' head in the next world. So that's a really exciting thing. Why? It's Shabbos. We were given that ability to send a package to our parents in the next world.
Does that mean that, okay, Does that mean that the crown also goes on that person's head also?
No, it's for your parents in the next world. It also says, to Ben Ishchai, that 1 hour of learning on Shabbos is equal to 1,000 hours during the week. So, if you're thinking about not coming to the Perek Shir, you come to the Perek Shir and you listen for 1 hour, it's like 1,000 hours during the week. Now, I'm not saying that you could give up on coming to 1,000 shiurim. That's not what I'm saying. But, you get the value of Ben Ishchai of what 1 hour of Torah is on Shabbos. What? Well, that's interesting because, it says Shabbos stands for, I said this, it says Shabbos stands for also Shina b'Shabbos Tainik. But, when you sleep, there's a famous story. It's one of those like incredible stories. But there's a famous story that about 2:00 in the afternoon, somebody was banging, a boy was banging on the Chibina Rav's door. And the Chibina Rav was sleeping. And, after the boy was incessantly banging, he got up and he came to the door. He thought it was, an emergency. And it was a little boy that wanted to ask him an extra question. So the Chibina Rav gently explained to him, that on Shabbos afternoon, people go to sleep after the meal. So the boy told him with the innocence of youth, I didn't think the Chibina Rav sleeps during the day. And the Chibina Rav said, and he quoted it, that hit him right in the heart. The little boy didn't think I sleep during the day. He was one of the biggest ga'anim in the entire world. But anyway, it's a great story. Notwithstanding the fact that I sleep Shabbos afternoon, I don't want anybody to get any ideas. I sleep. My Shabbos afternoon nap is. But anyway.
After a couple bourbons, it works really well.
Yeah, I don't need bourbons. Yeah, well, it is. It is. I mean, it is. It is. If you train yourself, the sleep is a hechsher mitzvah k'mitzvah. But I don't know if it's going to be 1,000 hours of learning. But anyway, Michal Avram, is there any cold water now?
Hey, what about sleeping through shear? Does that have any merit to it?
That doesn't help now. Is there anything cold in the refrigerator now?
No, I don't think, I didn't get anything together.
No, you want to do me a favor? You want to knock upstairs and ask my wife for a big glass of ice water.
I'm walking upstairs. Do you have a cup that I should take?
She'll give you a big glass of ice water. Okay. So finally, after being so late, I apologize, everybody.
Yeah.
Not to you. Not to you. When I said everybody, I meant Ruba Kikula. Some teach Rav Huna's comment, Ahod Tani Rav Yosef, on that which Rav Yosef taught, Im Kesef Talva Es Ami, if you give a loan of money to my nation, Es Ani Imach, the poor man with you. So here now, the Gemara tells us what is the order, what is the totem pole of giving loans. Ami v'nachri, if it's a choice to give to a Jew or a guy a loan, ami kaidim, you should give to a Jew first. Ani v'asher, a poor person or a rich person. Ani kaidim, the poor person comes first. Aniyecha v'aniyayircha, the poor of your family or the poor of your city. Since it says mibasarcha al tisalim, thank you very much. Since it says mibasarcha al tisalim, you shouldn't hide from your own flesh. So aniyecha koidmin, the aniyim of your family comes first. Aniyei ircha v'aniyei iracheres, the poor of your city and the poor of other cities. Aniyei ircha koidmin, the poor of your city comes first. Now, by the way, this idea, I made a bracha already. This idea is very, very important. You know, there are people that have very poor shuls or very struggling schools. But the people are more motivated to give money to their alma mater, to Chaim Berlin, to Torah V'das. Now, it's very nice to give to your alma mater, but the Chaim Berlin has generations of Talmidim. Your fledgling shul maybe only has 30 members or 40 members, and they're the only ones that are going to give to the shul. The same thing, it's very, very enticing to give a Sefer Torah to a shul. That's a great thing, to give a Sefer Torah. But there are shuls that have 9 Sifrei Torah in the Aron. But the Rebbeim haven't been paid for 3 months. So it's very important to know the order of giving tzedakah. This can't be emphasized enough. And you know, you might not really care to give to your not mutzlach dika relative. You know, they might not even be appreciative. But the bottom line is, if you're not going to take care of your own basa v'dam, who's going to take care of them? Amamar, Ami v'nochri, if it's a Jew or a guy, Ami kaidim. The Jew comes first. The Gemara said, Pshita, that's obvious. No, but the guy, you can lend with ribbis. And the Yid, you have to give for free. Listen, you need the money. Amar Rav Nachman Amali Huna explained it to me. Lo nitzchah la'afilu l'nakri b'yiris b'ribis uli Yisrael b'chinam. Even if you could give to the guy and charge interest, and to the Yid you wouldn't be able to charge interest, you should give to the Yid first. Tanya, Amar Rav Yaisi Boyu re'ei samyus einayim shel malvei b'ribis. Come and see how blind are the people that give with interest. You know, if somebody calls you a Russia, you'll mamish, you'll really be upset with him. Says the Gemara, Adam kari l'chavei a Russia. If a person calls his friend a Russia, yoridi my l'chayiv. You know, he really resents it. He really interferes with his life. Rashi says you can't interfere with his livelihood because that would be nekama. You can't take nekama. But it would really upset him. But here a man is ready to give a loan with interest. And he brings willingly witnesses, v'lavler and a scribe, v'kol mesudiyai, and a quill and ink, v'kaisvim, and he has, with full will, them write and sign plainly so that this person, about himself, kafir b'elokei Yisrael, is denying the God of Israel, because Hashem says not to give a loan with interest, and yet he is orchestrating that it should be written and signed and sealed and delivered, that he's an open Russia. So people have they're blindsided. They don't realize things. People don't realize when they talk in shul, they're publicizing to everyone that they're a fool. They don't realize that. I mean, in Shulchan Aruch it says that a person who talks in shul is a chaytei, is a sinner, v'gadol avoinai minasai, and his sin is too heavy to bear. When he talks publicly in shul, he's like putting up a sign, I am a fool. The person doesn't see it. Tanya, Reb Shimon Elazar Aimer, Kol mi sheyesh le'mais. Now here's the flip side. Kol mi sheyesh le'mais, whoever has money, umalvai some shaloi baribas, and he gives out loans without charging interests. So, this is an interesting thing. There's no pariv in Yiddishkeit. It's either good or bad. See, you give a loan without interest. Okay, you're following the rules. Olav Akasav Aimer, about him it says in the pasuk, Kaspay leinosan beneshech, he gave his money without biting people. V'shoichet al naki leilachach, he doesn't take a bribe against the innocent. Oise eile, if you do this, lo yimoit la'olam, you will never falter. That means that your money will stay solid. It won't falter. Holamarita, but this also teaches us, shekol amal ve'beribis, whoever gives loan and charges interest, nechasav mismaititim, their money falters, and their money diminishes. Says the Gemara, but we find people who give interest without taking ribis, and they also have setbacks. People give interest without ribis, become mismaititin, and they have setbacks. Amar Rabbi Elazar, those are temporary setbacks. Halalu mismaititin va'aylan, they're temporary setbacks, but they get back onto their feet. Va'alalu, but people that give money with interest, mismaititin, they fall, ve'einan aylam, and they don't have a comeback. As the pasuk says, this is a very interesting raya. Lama sabit, why do you look, boigdim, when people act treacherously? Tacharish, why are you silent? Bivala Russia, when a wicked person swallows tzadik mimenu. Now, swallowing implies complete swallowing. Tzad amarav hunam tzadik mimenu baleya. A person that just a partial tzadik might be swallowed, but tzadik gamar, a perfectly righteous person, ain't a baleya. He might falter, but he won't be swallowed. He'll have it come back. Tanya, now the Bryce is going to tell us two hard psukim, two phrases that the great Rebbe was not able to unravel, was not able to give an explanation. Tanya. Excuse me. Tanya, Rabbi Aimer Ger Tzedek, the righteous convert, that means somebody that accepts the 613 mitzvahs, Ger Tzedek Amal Inyan Mechira, that it said when an Eved Ivri sells himself to a Ger, the Ger Toishev Amal Inyan Ribis, and the resident alien, that's the guy that accepts the 7 mitzvahs B'nai Noach. So the Ger Tzedek that it says, by where an Eved Ivri sells himself to a Ger Tzedek, and the resident alien that you charge ribis, Eini Yodea Mahu. I don't know the pshat of what it means when they are written. So now the Gemara is going to explain what troubled Rebbe about these two cases. So says the Gemara, I realized that I didn't welcome everybody. I didn't, right? Did I? I did? I did.
Not everyone
Okay.
on the YouTube and on Coalition. But you mentioned us.
Yeah, I think I did, right. But I see Rabbi Kranz has since joined us, and Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg has since joined us, and Marshall is still here, so says the Gemara. What's difficult but Ger Tzedek? Ger tzedek ha'omer linyan mechira, the righteous convert, when an Eved Ivri sells himself to a righteous convert, what was bothering Rebbe? Dichsiv, it says, let's get the whole text. Dichsiv, chi yamach chi chaymach, when your brother becomes poor, v'nimkar lecha, and he sells himself to you because he can't manage, v'loy lecha, not just to you, not just to Barchia, el leger, even if he sells himself to a convert, shenem leger, v'loy leger tzedek, not just to a righteous convert, el leger toishev, to a resident alien, shenem leger toishev, mishpachas ger, even if he sells himself, the mishpachas ger ze anochi, that's a guy, kishoimer oile eker, to be uprooted, ze animker laiveris kechavim atzma, that's somebody who sells himself to do menial labor for a getchka, for an idol. Now, so what's the problem? What's Rebbe's problem about selling to a ger tzedek? So Amar, v'loy lecha, not just if he sells himself to you, el leger, shnema leger. Says the Gemara, you mean an Eved Ivri could sell himself to a ger tzedek? Remember the ger kani Eved Ivri? Can a ger tzedek acquire an Eved Ivri or a mini? We learned eina ger nikna be'Eved Ivri. A righteous convert cannot be sold as an Eved Ivri. Ve'ein isha v'ger kainin Eved Ivri. And a woman and a righteous convert cannot buy an Eved Ivri. So first it explains. Ger loy nikna be'Eved Ivri. A ger cannot be sold as a Hebrew slave. You know why? Because in the parsha of the Hebrew slave, it says after 6 years, he returns to his family. And a righteous convert doesn't have a family. Because Gershon is kayak katan shenayladami. Because it says v'shavda al mishpachtay bainan. He has to be able to return to his family. V'aleka, a righteous convert doesn't have any family. He's like a newborn babe. Ve'ein isha v'ger kainin Eved Ivri. A woman and a ger cannot acquire an Eved Ivri. Isha, a woman, it's not right for her to buy a slave. Because then she's going to be alone with the slave, and slaves are promiscuous. Isha lavoyrech ara, it's not proper. Ger nami, and a righteous convert cannot buy a slave because the purchase has to be reciprocal. One who could be sold as a slave could buy a slave. And since a ger tzedek cannot be sold as a slave, he cannot buy. Gemire de mikne kani. One who could be bought could acquire. The loy mikne, but if he can't be bought, like kani, he can't acquire. So therefore, Rebbe has a very good kasha. What does it mean? Leger is a ger tzedek, but we said that a ger tzedek cannot buy an Eved Ivri. Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak, so Rav Nachman Yitzchak resolves it. And he says, when it says that a ger cannot buy an Eved Ivri, it means ger ain't a kind of a dinah ki Yisrael. A ger cannot buy an Eved Ivri and have the din of Yisrael that buys an Eved Ivri. The din of a Yisrael that buys an Eved Ivri is if the Yisrael dies, his son inherits the Eved Ivri. Says, a kind of a dinah kanachri. But he could buy a Eved Ivri, but he would have a din like a guy buying an Eved Ivri. The Tanya, Hanirtza, a Eved who gets his ear pierced by the door and stays till the Yovel, Vanimker Lenachri, and one who is sold to a guy, either one, if the master dies, it's not inherited to the son or the daughter. Eina Oived lo yasaben v'lo yasabas. But in the event that a Yid buys an Eved Ivri, and the Yid dies, it's passed on to the son, not to the daughter, but to the son. Amamar, now let's visit something. Vein isha v'ger kainin Eved Ivri. A woman and a ger cannot buy an Eved Ivri. Name it like Reb Shimon Gamliel. Let's say this is not like Reb Shimon Gamliel. The Tanya, isha kainas hashvachas. A woman could buy a maidservant. Ve'ena kainas avadim. She cannot buy a manservant. Reb Shimon Gamliel, I'm half kainas avadim. So you see, according to Reb Shimon Gamliel, a woman could acquire an Eved. Says the Gemara, no. That's talking about an Eved Kanani. You see, An Eved Ivri she's not allowed to buy. Because an Eved Ivri is circumspect. He's tsanua. And if she sins with him, he won't tell anybody. An Eved Kanani is not circumspect. He's prost. And therefore she's afraid to sin with him because he's going to tell everybody. Even Reb Shimon Gamliel that says that she could buy a male servant, that's only an Eved Kanani, a Canaanite slave. Eved Ivri Tzniela. The Eved Ivri is circumspect. And therefore, he won't tell anybody. And therefore she might sin with him. Eved Kanani Paritzla. And therefore she'll be afraid, she'll be afraid to sin with him because he'll spill the beans, and therefore that's why she's allowed to buy an Eved Kanani. Says the Gemara, Elohad Tani Rab Yosef Amalta, a widow, loy tirbe kalba, she shouldn't raise a dog, v'loy tishrei barbe rab ushpiza, and she shouldn't have a yeshiva bacher staying by her. So the Gemara says, I could understand the yeshiva bacher, because since he's circumspect, maybe she'll sin with him, she's not afraid that he'll tell anybody. Bishlam barbe rav tzniela. He's private, so she might sin with him. Elakalba, the dog, if she has bestiality with him, the dog is going to follow her around. She'll be embarrassed. So why can't she stay with the dog? Kevin the misrachba, since he'll cling, the dog will cling to her. Misracha, she'll be afraid to have relations. Says Gemara, Amrei Kevin the chishad yelei umtza. Since if she feeds him pieces of meat, masrich basra, the dog is going to follow her around because of that. She won't be afraid to sleep with it. And the fact that the dog is following her around, people will just say that she gives him food. So, okay, now we understood what was Rebbe's problem with the Ger Tzedek by Mechira. What about the Ger Toshev by Ribbis? What was the problem with Ger Toshev by Ribbis? Ger Toshev Amal Inyan Ribbis Mahi. What was Rebbe's problem about the resident alien by Ribbis? By the way, I hope you all realize how easy this Gemara is. It's like a breath of fresh air. It's in honor of Shelley's father. One second. I was telling Berish Gessim, and I went to be Menachem Avel. Shelley, you put up the number? So Shelley has put up the number of Berish Gessim, and remember, he lost his mother, and he's getting up Sunday morning. I'm sure he would appreciate a call from the Olam. So I went to be Menachem Avel today, so he was reflecting on the fact that his mother was 97. And he said that his mother was with it till the very end, until she got sick, which was about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And he says he used to call her every night, and he used to talk to her, and till the very end of her life, he said he got so much from her. And I told him, Shelley, I told him as a nechama, I told him, Shelley's father passed away when he was 8. To have a mother to call every night till 97 is a real blessing. Real blessing. Yes.
It says a woman and an Eved can't be kind of an Eved Ivri.
Correct.
So for the Eved we bring a pasuk, and for the woman it sounds like it's an Aval Amru type of.
Right. It's a svara. It's a svara. It's chshada.
Really, she could be kind of, right?
It's chshada. We can't do it because it says we yisim l'kiyam Hashem Yisrael.
We don't allow her.
We don't allow her to do it. Now, so ger toishev amal inyan ribis mahi. It says that Rebbe had a problem. Why it says the resident alien by ribis? The chsiv v'chi yomach achicha. If your brother becomes poor, umata yadai imach, and his hand falters, Ve'echzakta boy, you should strengthen him. See, people are not muting themselves. Okay. Ger v'toishev. Ger v'toishev, a ger and a resident alien, v'chay imach. Al tikach me'itoy neshech b'tarbis. You can't take a bite increase v'yareisa me'alekecha v'chay achicha imach. So here it says that from a ger toishev you're not allowed to take interest. But we learned in our Mishnah that way. V'aminu love and mehen. You could take a loan with interest from a guy, umal v'naisan, and you could lend to them beribis, v'chein beger taishav, and likewise a resident alien. So you see that a guy that keeps the 7 mitzvahs b'nei noach, you are allowed to take and give with interest. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak miksiv al tikach me'itam. Does it say you shouldn't take from them in the plural? Me'itoy ksiv. Yisrael, and therefore he learns that the fact that it says v'ger v'toishev is not, you're not allowed to take interest, but the mitzvah of erzakta boy, to support him, applies by a ger toishev. Says the Gemara, Tan Rabbanan, bottom line of Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph, al tikach me'itoy neshech v'tarbis. You can't take neshech and tarbis, aval ata nasa loy orev, but you could be a guarantor. So the Gemara says this can't be taken literally, as we turn yet another amud in Ezel Neshech. That means that we only have 4 blot left in Ezel Neshech, Rabbi Yisai. Wow, that's really something. Really something. Says the Gemara, what guarantor? Arav Laman. A guarantor for who? Ilema Arav Yisrael. That, let's say, that Marshall wants to take interest from Shelley, and I want to be a guarantor. Says the Gemara, Ilema Arav Yisrael. Vatana elu oivim b'lo yisaseh. The following are over alav, hamalva, the one that lends with interest, v'aloiva, the borrower, he'orev, the guarantor, v'oedem, and the witnesses. So you see that orev is also a negative prohibition. So what do you mean? Ella, says the Gemara, linachri. That means that if a Jew borrows from a guy, I can guarantee it. So if, let's say, Shelley takes a loan from Tony with interest, so if Shelley defaults on the loan, I could be a guarantor. Says the Gemara, but wait a second. The Kavan de Dina de Nachri, the Azal Basar Arva. Since the law is that in the Gentile court, the law is that the guy could go after me directly. It's snapshot. If I guarantee Shelley's loan, Tony doesn't have to go first to Shelley, and if Shelley defaults, only then he could come to me. Shelley could go directly to me. So then if Shelley goes directly to me, then I have to, Tony goes directly to me, then I go to Shelley and collect from him the loan and the interest. So then it would be a Yid collecting from a Yid. It came the Dine de Nachri, the Azal Basa Arva, Ionami de Kashaka Mine Ribisa. Then when I go subsequently and claim it from Shelley, I'm taking interest from Shelley. It should be Aser. Amar Rav Sheshes shekibel alav ladoin b'dinei Yisrael. No, they accept. Tony accepts to do it in the Jewish way, and that is that he has to collect from Shelley, and only if Shelley defaults, then he collects from me. So, since it's Shelley's loan, if Shelley defaults, then he collects from me. Once he collects from me, he's out of it. And then the amount that Shelley owes me is not a loan and interest. The amount that he owes me is whatever I paid. That's not construed as interest. But says the Gemara, but I don't understand. If Tony wants to go by the ways of the Jews, then he shouldn't charge interest. Then Tony shouldn't take interest either. So the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Sheshes, shekibel alav lezu. He accepted the rules of the guarantor, but like kibel alav lezu, he wasn't ready to give up the interest. Now, we're going to explain the last stanza of the Mishnah. Malva Yisrael ma'osev shel nachri midas hanachri. Now, what's the case? So the Gemara is going to explain from a brisa thoroughly that there's two cases over here. Case 1 and case 2. We're going to follow both case 1 and case 2 because then we're going to refer to it. So we're going to do this together. Got my pen out for case 1 and case 2. Okay? So, Tan Rabbana. We need players over here. Okay. He looks ripe for the plucking. Marshall and Shelley. Those are our players. I wonder where Mark is. Mark has been missing the last 3 nights. Shout out to Mark. We're missing you, Mark. So Tana Rabbanan. Malvi Yisrael ma'isiv shel nachri midas hanachi. Shelley can lend the money of a guy with the consent of the guy, avaloi midas Yisrael, but not with the mindset of the Yid. Ketzad. Yisrael shalava mayis min anachri beribis. Marshall took a loan of $10,000 from Tony for ribis, 15%. Right? Marshall took a loan. He needed another convertible because he had a real chush of a person coming to town. He couldn't get them to sit in
a bigger one.
in his monstrosity. So for me, it's good enough. But when a real gadol comes, you need a better car. So Yisrael shalava mayis min anakri beribis. Marshall took a loan from Tony with ribis. Ubikesh lachzirim lo, and Marshall was ready to return the $10,000 to Tony. Mitzal Yisrael acher, Shelley found Marshall. V'amalai, and Shelley told Marshall, namely, give it to me, and I'll give you the 15%. It's hard to find a loan these days. So namely, give it to me, v'aniya ala lecha, and I'll give you the 15%, kederech sh'ata malalai, like you're going to give to Tony. Now that's awesome. That's awesome because Marshall is doing it on his own. Instead of returning the money to Tony, he's taking the money which he has and he's lending it to Shelley for 15%, that's not cricket. However, if Marshall says, look, I'm returning the money to Tony, so here, let's go get together with Tony, and if he says I should give it to you, then I'll give it to you. So mutter. So that's case one. So case one is Marshall took the loan. Marshall took loan from Tony, and Shelley wants the money. So for Marshall to give it directly to Shelley would be forbidden. But if Marshall stands Shelley with Tony and says, Tony, want to give it to Shelley? And Tony says, yes, that's allowed. So that's the first case. Now what's the second case? Here, Tony took a loan from Marshall. So Tony took a loan for Marshall for 15%. Probably with Marshall it was more like 20%. Right?
20 is better.
Yeah, 20% plus 100 francs. So
With sauerkraut.
V'chein nachri shalav amayis mi Yisrael b'ribis. Tony took a loan for Marshall. Now a bikesh lachziyum, like Tony wants to return it to Marshall. But Mitzvah Yisrael achar, but Shelley found Tony. V'amalei, and Shelley said to Tony, Taneim li, give it to me. V'ani alalach, and I'll give you the 20%. Kederach shat malalei, like you wanted to give to Marshall. Mutter, because over here Tony is giving it to Shelley, so that's mutter. But but if Tony said, well, listen, it's Marshall's money, I brought him to Marshall, and if Marshall says, okay, Shelley, that's awesome. It's awesome. So now the problem, though, is, in the second case, we said that if Tony gives it to Shelley, if Tony gives the money to Shelley, so in the event that Marshall says it's okay, it's not allowed. But why? Tony never gave it back to Marshall. And a guy can't be a shliach. So why should it be usher? Even if they stood together with Marshall. But if Tony never gave it back to Marshall, Tony can't be a shliach. A guy can't be a shliach. So the Gemara says, Bishleima Seifa, if Tony brought Shelley to Marshall, and Marshall said, give it to him, so maybe we say that there is shlichus l'chumra, midrabanan. Bishleima Seifa l'chumra. Elaresha, but in the first case, where, remember we said that Marshall took a loan from Tony. So we said that Shelley wants it, so we said that if Marshall brought Shelley to Tony, so then Marshall could give it to Shelley. But since Tony never got it back, so it's really still coming from Marshall because there's no shlichus. And if it's really coming from Marshall, it should be aser. Elaresha, Kaven dein shlichus l'nachri, iyo nir de kashaka minei ribisa. Since even where Marshall brought Shelley to Tony, but if Marshall didn't give it back to Tony, so then how is it allowed? You can't say that Marshall is Tony's shliach and it's coming from a guy because there's no shlichus by a guy. Kaven dein shlichus l'nachri iyo nir de kashaka minei rivisa. It comes out that Shelley is taking a loan from Marshall. So Rav Huna says, you know what it's talking about? Am Rav Huna bar Menoich b'shmei Rav Acha bar Bereid Rav Ika, when it says that Marshall took the loan from Tony, and then brought Shelley to Tony, he didn't just bring Shelley to Tony. Marshall put the money down in front of Tony. Where Tony told them, Marshall put the money on the ground, and you're exempt. And then Shelley took it from Tony. That's why it's allowed. Says the Gemara, what's the chiddush? That's obvious. So then he gave it back to Tony, and the loan's coming from Tony. It's where Tony took it from Marshall's hand and then gave it to Shelley. That's why it's allowed. Again, says the Gemara, that's obvious. Says the Gemara, Mao Desema. I might think that Nochri Gufe Ki Ovid, when the guy did it, Adaita the Yisrael Kagam Yoiv, that Tony is giving it for Marshall, and we said, we do say Shlichus L'Chumra, Kamash Malan, that we don't say that. We say that he's accepting it back, and now he's giving it to Shelley from himself, and you're allowed to take ribbis from a guy. I mean, you're allowed to pay ribbis to a guy. Rav Ashi wants to deal with this a different way. Rav Ashi wants to explain. Rav Ashi Amar Ki Amrinan Ein Shlichus L'Nachri. Where do we say that there's no shlichus by a guy? Hani Mili Betruma. That's where we learn shlichus from. Because by Truma it says, Atem, you should take. And we learn Gam Atem L'Rabbis Shliach. And therefore we say, it says, Rashi Amar Ki Amrinan Ein Shlichus L'Nachri. Hani Mili Betruma. But elsewhere, yesh shlichus l'nachri. However, Rav Ashi bedusahi, either it means it's foolish, or berusahi, it should be taught outside. It's incorrect. Because maish not truma delay. Why do we say that by truma there's no shlichus from a guy? Dichsiv atem, gam atem. It says by truma you, gam atem means even a shliach. And we dash him atem b'nei bris, just like you have to be a Jew. Af shluchachem nami b'nei bris. But if that's true by Truma, we learn out shlichus from Truma. But shlichus the kol Torah kula nami mit Truma gamrin Allah. We learn out from Truma. And therefore, just like by Truma, shlichus is only by a yid and not by a guy. El Ravashi berusi. Or it's taught outside, or it's foolish. Bedusa. Ikadamre, Amar Rav Ashi Ki Amrinan Ein Shlichus L'Nachri. Hani Mili Inhu L'Didan. For them becoming agents for us. Aval Anan L'Didhu, but we for them, Havina Lo Shliach. We can be a Shliach. Right, so then, in that case, Marshall could be a shliach for Tony to give it to Shelley, and then it would be allowed. However, says the Gemara, "V'hoder of Ashi Barusi or Bedusi," it's foolish because Maishna inhu lidi dandeloi. Why can't they be a shliach for us? Because it says Gam atem l'rabbi shluchachem ma'atem b'nei bris. Just like you have to be a Jew. Af shluchachem b'nei bris. So hanan l'ditu nami. Then we, to be a shliach for them, is also ma'atem b'nei bris kamer. Just as the principal has to be a Jew. So also, just in the case of shlichus, just like in the case of shlichus, the principal has to be a Jew. So therefore, it can't be that Marshall could be an agent for Marshall, because the principal has to be a Jew. Elahad Rav Ashi Barusi, that which Rav Ashi cannot be included. Okay, again, I want to remind you that I did the Mishnah Yomis already, and it's a really good one. The Olam should listen to it. It's not uploaded yet. Is it? No, it's not uploaded yet. I came straight after the Mishnah Yomis to Marv and Sfira and the Shir, but it will be uploaded. It's a very good one. Also, for the Shabbos table on Kedoshim is already uploaded. There's also a 5-minute share that I gave. It's on YouTube also, a proper respect in shul, so you can catch that as well. And if you haven't listened to the share, What is Holiness, last night's Kedoshim share, it was a really good one, if I may say so myself. So you want to listen to that. Now we're going...
What's our Shabbos?
What's his Shabbos? Good question. Good question. What time?
It'll be here.
It says Daf 72 minutes after 9:14. It says Daf Yomi is 10:15. 72 and 73 is what you have on there.
10:15?
Yes.
Daf Yomi 10:15.
Correct, Rabbi.
Daf Yomi 10:15. Okay, and we're going to do the Chok now. Have a good Shabbos, everybody.